Steve Mera, and thank you for joining me on the Big Picture Show. Today, my guest has compiled about 5 books. He's an author of 5 books and also has his own podcast show. He's a good colleague and a good friend, and he's been specializing in the research of, well, I can only put it down to high strangeness in the UK. And most people might think all high strangeness is happening elsewhere in the US and Canada and stuff, but I assure you it isn't. Thank you for coming on the show, Paul. It's Paul Sinclair. For your research that you've been doing, Paul, is incredible over the years. Most people will know from your series of truth proof books, which is, I think, volume 4 now, 1, 2, 3, and 4. But you've also got another book, and I can see the image behind you on your board there behind, called Night People,
The
which
Night People.
is different from your truth proof series. It's about your own personal experiences with this phenomenon from since an early age. I just wonder if you can tell people a little bit about how you got into this, and of course, the reasons why this Night People came out.
Well, first of all, Steve, thank you for inviting me to join you on this brilliant podcast. And how did I get involved in it? The phenomena, yeah, I think at times it visits a person, and we've got no say in it. I would think that, probably you've said it. Other researchers have said it, so I'm not breaking new ground, but it does not perform to order usually. Everything's on its terms, even if we think it is performing to order. It seems to have an ulterior motive. So from childhood, I've said it many times, a child does not keep a diary, so I can't think of the year. 61 years old, born 2nd 11th, 1962. So I'm thinking that these memories go back to about 4 years of age. I know some people can remember even further back, but I don't. And I can give you an example of the first time I think it happened, because when I was writing Night People, I kind of dug deep and I was trying to work out when this started happening. And
Yeah,
we lived in a typical semi-detached council house in a place called Old Dennerby. Fields at the back, pasture with cattle in it and everything, and small front bedroom, large front bedroom, and a medium back bedroom. Well, I was in the back bedroom. I'm sorry to labour on this, people, but
I
I
know
want to paint a
I know what
picture.
the bedrooms are like. Yeah,
Yeah.
growing up in this.
So I woke up in the night, and the curtains were a steel grey colour, and they were made of fiberglass. Believe it or not, fiberglass curtains. So there'll be some people old enough to remember buying them. They were cheap and cheerful, and that's what it were about for my mum and dad, because they didn't have a lot of money. So I'm looking at these curtains, and I can see what I think are cows' eyes in the curtains, 4 sets.
Oh,
And I'm looking at them, and why do I think cow's eyes? Because a 4 or 5-year-old child's not got much experience of life, and we had cattle, Frisian cattle, in the pasture at the back of our home, directly our back garden onto it. So we all look for things that we can draw comparisons to. So I'm looking at these eyes and not frightened. I'm just looking at them and thinking, why am I seeing these? What are these? Am I really seeing cow's eyes? And then it kind of morphed in and out, and I could see the shape of, I wouldn't be thinking alien, shape of beings. And the next thing I know, they're around my bed.
yeah.
And I'm crying, and I can't move. And that's where that memory stops. And Night People is a collection of, I don't mean short accounts like that, but cameos of events, because I haven't got a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's almost as though, I don't think that it's done by design. Perhaps people who have interaction with these beings, these unknown others, perhaps there's a lot more people having interaction but simply don't remember. And what might separate me and other people, and it don't mean we're special, is that we retain fragments of what has happened, and really strong memories, the ones that I do retain. But I must say, Steve, and anybody who's got these kind of snapshots of the incredible, you never ever stop searching or trying to advance and get that little bit further.
Yep.
And it's impossible for me. I can't do it.
It is designed by construction to be difficult.
Yeah.
They really are. They're ahead of us. They
Yeah.
evolve. They learn. They know how to deceive. They know, how to manipulate us 100%. It's difficult. We're playing their game, as you're well aware. Occasionally, though, just occasionally they'll rear their head, and you end up having those experiences and stuff. But did they always appear as beings, Paul, or did they ever appear to be anything else?
Um, I've got one image, same bedroom again, and I were always only child, so I don't mean I were lonely. I've got I went to play with friends and that, but I were always looking. I'm very close to nature. I always have been. Used to things you can't do now is to collect birds' eggs. I used to
Yeah.
catch grass snakes and slow worms and sell them to a place called Northern Zoological Supplies in Doncaster. From being about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old to 12-year-old. I frown upon it now. I know it's not right, but that's the kind of thing this little boy used to do. So where am I going? I would be look. I can remember looking out of the window and seeing, and this will make sense in a moment. Seeing it had flooded. The River Don had flooded, and it had flooded the pasture at the back. It went up on a hill, so the cattle were safe. But I could see like a pencil above the water. It looked like a pencil, and there were people around it. Now, I had some good friends. I think I would have been about 12 or 13 here. And I had some good friends who had a small farm called Brian and Angela and their son Darren. And for some reason, they had a dog called Fred, which will make sense in a moment. For some reason, they were the pencil was in the water and it were very shallow, and they were stood around it. It couldn't have been them. I wasn't in bed. I was looking out of the window from my bedroom window at Brian, Angela, and Darren. Darren was a little boy. And it's almost, I believe it was an image that had been placed in my mind because this pencil, it moved about on the water like a dragonfly would. Right. And it was a long, thin pencil, a bit like a telegraph pole. Pencil. Let's try to give some other analogies to make sense for people. But then suddenly, all I could see was a huge white owl that just rose up. And it was down in the bottom of the pasture, and I shouldn't have been able to see its eyes, yet I could see them as clear as day, bright orange yellow eyes. And that's the only memory I've got. Now, is that alien, if we want to use that word, related? It's a strange one.
It is. Yeah, that is a real strange one. But we have heard of things similar to this, because seemingly the phenomena grabs our, and utilizes our ability to perceive what we're trying to understand, and it's completely manipulated, so that we know something's there. B, we're trying to work out what it is we're seeing, and C, is it truly what we're perceiving? Because with sudden things altering and changing, the whole concept of it is otherworldly. It's just what is going on. It's like a fairy tale type stuff that's happening. I mean, I can certainly relate to that from being a child. My first experience was a bedroom experience. The damn thing walked out the corner of my room in the middle of the night. Now, I'm a child, I'm 6 or 7 years of age. I usually would sleep right through for no apparent reason. I found myself woke. I think it was about three-ish or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was alert. When your kids wake up, I was tired and turn over.
Groggy.
Groggy. No, I was absolutely alert, and this thing, and I focused on it, and it was the darkest corner of the room, Paul. The darkest corner. It was pitch black, but for some reason I had to focus on that, and then this thing walked out from that corner, and totally manipulated me. Not only was I not being able to control my actions physically, I wasn't be able to control my actions psychologically, about emotions, because the whole thing about this being, and it was like a grey, but it was a little bit different because it was wrinkly, a bit more wrinkly. I don't, a lot of people say, oh, it was a grey alien, a smooth grey skin. But no, mine was a bit wrinkly. It was a bit unusual. But it was definitely a sort of type of, grey type entity of some sort. And it was just controlling it. I got the impression it was there to test my emotions.
Yeah.
The one thing, I was sat on the end of the bed. This thing comes straight, and it's literally that far away from me. I don't know why they get so close to you, but it was literally about 5 or 6 inches away from my face, its face. And then I'm jumping up and down on the bed, and I'm laughing and I'm happy. And I don't know why I'm doing it. I couldn't control myself emotion wise or physically. I'm jumping up and down, laughing, jumping on the bed as if it's fun. And then the next minute I'm sat on the bed and I'm in tears, I'm sobbing. It's like, whoa, what it's like the emotions. And then it came up and pinched me. It actually pinched me on the cheek so hard. I'm four fingers, not
Mm,
five, definitely four. Remember that.
yeah.
And it was really painful. So it's just like I was experiencing, the emotion of fun and laughter and sadness and then pain.
Yeah.
And it's just like I was being tested, something, And then it eventually moved off to the corner, and suddenly came around of like, what the hell? And I screamed the place down. Now, from that day on, I always had to sleep with the light on. It was an
Yeah.
absolute must. I was never afraid of the dark until then. But further experiences, what used to happen was like in our back garden, we had a laurel bush. Now, those big, thick, heavy, rubbery leaf ones, they're very dense, so you can't see into the bush. It's about maybe 6 foot high and about maybe 3 or 4 foot deep. And a horse's head used to come out. And it was a white horse, and it was a horse, and I used to look at it, and it used to talk to me.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It's so strange how they give us these things that we're kind of familiar with, and but it is totally alien to the situation that they're placed in. And what you said, Steve, about the emotions, it's almost as though, and you would think that if it is so advanced intelligence, it wouldn't need to it's almost as though it's experiencing emotion through us.
Yes, I'd understand it maybe.
Yeah, I felt what were happening to me were fear based, and I really did, so much so that as a young boy, I wet the bed, and I didn't have a particularly understanding dad. I wouldn't tell my dad what were happening. I would sooner get a smack off him than tell him what were happening, because he wouldn't have believed it. But that's, if the strange thing was, if we ever went to Scotland to visit my grandparents, or we ever went on holiday, no bedwetting, nothing like that, and I'd be frightened to death that that's what I were going to do.
Yeah.
Because you're in somebody else's home,
yeah.
But that never happened. It only happened in that property, and I don't know how these beings, these unintelligent others, managed to render all our senses to literally just a standstill, apart from the eyes, because I can remember screaming. I mean, I'm sure it might be painful listening for some listeners, this, but there'll be other people who are thinking I can relate to this, and not making a sound.
Not making a sound, yeah.
And not making, and feeling the tears as you laid there running down the side of your face. And
it's horrific. It is I mean, as you grow up, and occasionally you witness fear. If you got bullied at school or something, and they're waiting outside for you, that's fear as a kid. That fear, that's a big fear for a child. I understand that. But never fear like this. That it was like it grabbed your very soul. This thing, it was awful.
But do you know, Steve, the fear, which is, it's interesting that you say that, the fear factor kind of runs through the entire full spectrum of the phenomena, doesn't it? So what are we dealing with? The same type of science, if it can be a science, if it's some kind of exotic science, is that what we're dealing with? Because it seems to run through every spectrum. The people in the forest will get that feeling of immense fear, but not know why.
It's above normal fear. It's like, I've always thought it might have been some form of induction that's been happening, but it's because it always seemed to me it's more than my normal fear level.
Yeah.
It's beyond that. It is terror. That's the only way. It's terror. And you think to yourself, psychologically, what are you terrified? What are you terrified? What is it?
Why are you terrified of something that looks quite, if we broke it down as fully grown adults, if we broke it down and we actually had one of these beings stood in front of us now, they're diminutive.
Yes.
Yet the power that they hold is kind of monstrous. It's huge.
It really is. But I mean, what we're trying to touch on here, and with research I've done with Barry Fitzgerald and some of this, as you know, that we've really looked into the aspects of that fear induction and possibly a number of processes that happen. But it seems to come back round to like our very inner self. We have like another part to us inside, which is screaming, which is really terrified. And it is that mechanism within us, that survival sense, whatever we want to call it, which goes into super panic mode. And then and of course it seeps into our normal feelings, and we can't understand that terror. It doesn't make sense. I've talked to people, you've talked to people who are in regular places that they go to all the time. But
Yeah.
on this particular occasion, they see something and they're absolutely terrified. So much so that they don't even want to go back to that location. Yet they've been there, going there all their lives and never had a problem with it. But all of a sudden, it becomes associated to something which is terrifying.
And do you think that perhaps they're able to trigger the chemicals within our body to create this reaction? I know they're probably into right or a wrong answer. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a tricky one because we do know through experiments that we can produce infrasonic sounds which we wouldn't normally hear, and it affects the body in a certain way that it puts it into an alert and fear. It can induce fear through that process. We know what that can happen. It's even been utilized in certain weapons, from specialized hearing machines that produce certain sonics to crowd controls and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we do know that maybe there's a possibility because we have recorded infrasonic sound around phenomena, and that may be some part and parcel about why it has to, I don't know why it has to produce that. Maybe it's just a controlling mechanism to make sure that, because when you're in fear and in terror, you don't act like you normally would. You want to take a step back as opposed to a step forward. So maybe it's a mechanism or some sort. But what is interesting, Paul, is that I've talked to a lot of researchers around the world, and though that a lot of people don't actually say, I mean, you don't call yourself really, you don't come out and say I'm an experiencer. You're an investigative researcher like myself. It was always in the back of my mind, okay, well, yes, you have to consider yourself. I have had experiences. Maybe that's the point of why we are and where we are at this moment in time.
Agree.
We talked about this. There's a lot of people out there in the world, some of the big researchers, and they'll never come forward and talk about how they got into that subject. It'll be some other story. But what you tend to find is there is quite a few of them have come forward and said, well, after some years, my experiences started first and it led me into the subject. And I thought, well, I wonder if that's like some form of initiation. In other words, we have these experiences. It seems that they don't seemingly not caring about wanting this information out. It's as if like sometimes they want to help get the information out. Let's push the information. We want people to know we exist. We want people to know that these things happen. But we would probably have never done that if we hadn't experienced it. I mean, I don't think I would. If I had a normal childhood, I don't think I'd be doing what I would be doing.
I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't have. Without, as you've just said, sound like I'm repeating this, but without the experiences, I wouldn't be on this path that I'm on today. And I'm sure there's many other people. When I finished Night People, I spoke to you about it, and I remember speaking to Whitley Strieber about it, and he said, "Think hard before you pull." Whitley said, "Think hard before you decide you're going to go ahead and publish it, because it will change your life, and it will make people think different about you." And he said, "Think hard." And obviously, I've done it now. There's kind of no turning back, but at the end of the day, Steve,
I think it's a good thing. And I said to you, I mean, I've never done it. I haven't. And it's not because I don't want to. It's because I do share. I've talked on podcasts and shows and different things about my experiences. I don't hide it. I just never got around to doing a book.
No.
But do you know what? There's a book's worth of it,
Yeah.
Because I thought by teenage, because when I started looking into this, I started hearing, some of those old researchers saying, well, it disappears in your teens when you start getting into girlfriends and, and your life and work and stuff. It just phases out. Well, it didn't for me. And it still is prevalent today, as it always has been. And it's the same for Barry. It didn't take its foot off the pedal. It's too coincidental that we've gone down certain paths, and we tend to go to live in areas where there's a footprint of phenomena. We just geared somehow to sort of just somehow just it falls on our laps that we're in the right places. Is that the right
Do you know, I don't think it's as simple as a somehow, Steve. It could be that everything's mapped out and you're doing what you're doing, I'm doing what I'm doing because you've got a message to impart to the populace, and that might be why, because I've no disrespect to anybody who gets the positive out of this subject. That might be why they get the positive, because they're the right people to spread that word about it. Paul Sinclair's had negative experiences, and he's the type of guy that can relay that. Who can say? Because you just said I go to locations or live in locations where these things happen.
Yeah.
Is it by coincidence? Is it or more by design? You said it. A lot of people will say this stops when you get to your teens. I think at about 14, it seemed to peter out. It did happen that we moved house at 14 to a place called Conisbrough, but immediately moving to this property that I live in now, I've been here about 33 years. So it'd be 1994-ish, 93, 94. It started immediately.
Yeah.
Almost as though this is the next stage. It sounds too corny, but this is where it starts again for him.
I couldn't get away from it, Paul. He knows where to seek me out. I thought he would never let up. And there has been times when there was a spate of things which was just lasted a couple of 2 or 3 months. It was just full on, It's interesting that those people in my environment will witness that phenomena with me. It's not a solely experience for me. It's others will experience it around me, And when I moved to Bolton, I never realised that I'm living on the doorstep of strange and profound stuff. I live right next to Winter Hill.
Yeah.
And Winter Hill is there's dogmen and UFOs and paranormal and strange stuff. I've witnessed stuff up there. It's, it is a weird, weird place. It is strange that we find ourselves in those locations.
In these locations, yeah. And in a way, we're kind of a skeptic's perfect scenario or perfect that's probably just the word for it, because they say, how come Steve Mera lives in a place and he sees things when he's in that place? Or I'm not using you as an example as such. Paul Sinclair lives in Bridlington or East Yorkshire, and he just happens to see lots of unexplained phenomena. I think if we looked back in your particular area, people would find, if they wanted to dig deep enough, that things have been happening there at Winter Hill long before Steve Mera started researching it. Things have been happening here in East Yorkshire and North Yorkshire long before Paul Sinclair had a look at it. So, that it doesn't stand up if you break it down like that, because but it could be design that you are actually in this area now, because something tells me you're probably going to be spending a lot more time in these locations, doing a lot more research, boots on the ground type stuff, Steve.
Well, you have to, really. You can't. You can only do so much from talking to people. And once we've got to a point where we've got mountains of it, it's only another stone to the mountain we're adding. It doesn't get us nearer to trying to understand. Having personal experiences, well, that's interesting.
But it puts you on the path, Steve, the personal experience.
And there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong. I said to you, about bringing this book out, Night People. I said, at the end of the day, I now consider it. I used to at one point thought, oh God, do we talk about it? But that was some years back. And now I think to myself, no, it's good, because it gives us a good relation with what people have experienced.
Yeah.
So we've experienced stuff. We know that. I understand from that witness point of view when talking to them now how they must have felt. And that sometimes I can understand them struggling to try and tell me what they've seen, because it's so unusual and abnormal, but I can understand it because I've seen things and I which should not exist. It's simple as that. But when you do, you kind of relate. I understand what they're talking about.
And what's good about what you're saying is that you and I like to think myself as well, and Barry and a lot of other people are open enough to accept that what someone else might have experienced, even if it's not the same as what you've experienced, they've experienced it. Because you do get some researchers and some groups who just have one narrative, and if it doesn't fit that particular narrative, then it can't have happened. And we know that's vastly different. And, there's so many different sort of avenues that
There's
this
a
seems
lot.
to go down.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if I was to write out every single experience, I haven't had that many which are identical, which is interesting enough. It seems to have been multiple variations, but not much always the same. There's always changes. There's always things
Yeah.
different. And that's that, like Jacques Vallée said, it's that it's the phenomenon delivers absurdity. It's like it doesn't have a base model. It's just randomly picking out different things, and that's why we have so much variations. I mean, it just in 1977, Hynek stated that Project Blue Book, had over 12 million variations of the UFO phenomenon. 12 million. There is no base model, and that's
No.
what's crazy about this. And this is why people will think, well, no one's going to believe that because I've never heard of somebody saying that they've ever seen something like this. No one's going to ever believe me. And it's that absurdity, isn't it, that it doesn't help.
Do you think that's, once again, do you think that that's by design then? Because we know that whatever's presenting and interacting is ultimately it's in charge. I mean, we might evolve at some point in our sort of scientific advancement to being able to predict and understand a little bit more about it, or a lot more about it. But at the moment, I think it is in charge. So do you think the absurdity that you've just talked about is perhaps designed because these beings, these intelligences think, well, nobody's ever going to believe them?
No, yeah, exactly. And you can't put any of the dots together because you'll go round and round and round. You know that. I know that. We do get forward somehow, and that is basically through little pieces of information and evidence that we find. But it's not in clear sight, is it, Paul? You've got to hunt it out. You really got to hunt it out because you'll walk. There are people walking through evidence every day.
Yeah.
Literally, they're walking right through it, not knowing they're walking right through an evidential location. And where if you do certain tests, and are there at certain times as well, because sometimes some of these footprints don't last for very long, you'll get anomalies, reported and registered anomalies, which is the evidence that you're looking for. But we're blind to it because we can't see it. Sometimes we can't hear it. It's tricky.
Yeah, I think if you'll probably cast your mind back to, I think it was probably 2017, 2018, and myself and Chris Turner, Chris had come through and we were doing a bit of work up on Clifftops with some animal fatalities that were occurring, and a lot of them, not just like one or two. I mean, this guy in between 2017 and 2019, it went into February 2019, he'd lost 50 sheep.
Yeah.
As roe deer, badger, and I realise we've just jumped away a little bit, but I just want to just touch on this. You lent us a Geiger counter, which we used in this research that we were doing, and I found a roe deer that had recently been killed. Because it does relate, because you said these areas and the residue does not last long. Probably not them words, but that's what I think you meant.
Yeah,
we got startling results with the Geiger counter around the deer and in the area.
You shouldn't. That's what's unusual. You see, that's a pointer to some anomaly. There's an anomalous incident taking place there. But how many? You would not know it was there, would you? Unless you
wouldn't know it was there, Steve. And the point was, when you said it dissipates or it doesn't last within the time span that me and Chris were looking at this, and when 3 or 4 days later, it had gone.
Yeah.
There was nothing there. No big spikes in this radiation or whatever. The meter was kicking out. It had gone. Yeah. And you find that you find that with the EMF meters. You get startling EMF results in areas where you should get nothing. Recently, I've got a good friend called Peter Masters, would call him a bit of an electronic genius. He's the guy that's been bench testing some of the equipment that ultimately they're using at places like Skinwalker, because it's his friend who's designed some of this. Yeah. So we've been taking some of it with us, and Peter came with us, and we went to the Rudston monolith. For listeners that don't know what the monolith is, it's Britain's tallest standing stone, and it's just about 12 miles in from the East Yorkshire coast.
Yeah.
The stone should not have been kicking out 1.6 gigahertz. He's got his laptop with him. He's got the equipment, and he's put this meter near to it, and there it is.
Yeah.
Now, it's not just words, we've got it on film, it's showing what it's kicking out.
Exactly. We've done the same thing in Ireland, and Barry's done the same thing here when we could power LED lights from some of these stones at certain given times.
Yeah.
So it's just crazy. I don't.
We've been back since, and it's dormant. There's nothing. We've
Yeah.
been with it, just bog standard EMF meters,
Mhm.
which will just light up all singing, dancing, and then you go back again and there's nothing. You know,
No.
it's very strange, and devoid of all electrical equipment, by the way, as well.
It is. It is strange. I mean, when we've noticed this, that is why when we were dealing with the paranormal phenomena, we were seeing pockets of energy which dissipate quickly. So that after a disturbance, so in other words, we might have some physical phenomena take place, and just around where that physical phenomena is, there's a very acute, isolated location, maybe only 2 or 3 foot around that object, that mood.
Yeah.
She's registering. It's registering hot on on EMF. But an hour got it's gone. It's gone.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, what is happening? So it's like sometimes whatever these experiences are, you can throw them into the paranormal, you can throw them into the ufological side of stuff. But when it's interacting in our environment, there's sometimes evidence left behind, which is usually would be normally undetectable to us. But
Yeah.
now we're getting a bit clever. Now we've got some things, but it's random. You've got to look for it. But if you've got an incident where you've got, there's been an animal attack, or that there's something is taking place there, then you can go to that location, do those tests. How much are we walking through and not even knowing?
Yeah, that's come full circle, Steve. Absolutely, what you've just said, walking through the evidence and not even knowing. But I suppose that's our advances in scientific equipment, if that's the words for the EMF meters. It's things that we wouldn't have had 30, 40 years ago that everybody could use now, or doing the research, or not even doing the research, just taking it out, groups of people in these areas of high strangeness. I know, like you've just said, Winter Hill, there's a group of people go out there and they're regularly looking for the strangeness.
Yeah, I mean, I look out my window and I can see the mast, but
Yeah.
these balls of light come turn up around those masts. They like the mast. Apparently, I don't know why, but they seem to do, and that's a
What's the
regular.
power output, do you think? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it could be. It could be. It's unknown. It just goes
Yeah.
back a long time, though.
Well, we had a landing, or an alleged landing, on. Let me just have a look, on the 28th of March, which is
not long ago. Yeah.
not long ago, the 28th of March, just over a month ago, at Speeton, and this guy. He's got fields at the back of his property with sheep in, small strip of woodland, and the farm behind that. And he goes out to let his dog out one night. It's just a row of standard houses. It's just a semi-detached house on this row, because there's not a lot in Speeton. It's a tiny village. And he sees on the field, literally, I think I've done it. I think it's about 190 yards away, a huge ball of orange light that he said looked like the moon. But it's bright orange. It's not the moon, because if anybody's seen the moon rising over the sea, or it's not coming from the sea, but as it rises, it looks red. It's not the moon. So he shouts his partner and his stepson, and they're looking at it. It's morphing in and out of shape. It's on the field. It's bright red. It looks like fire. And they go upstairs and they're watching it for several minutes. And then it rises into the air and becomes a cigar in shape.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I went to the farm about a week later. I couldn't get access to it before. I knew somebody that knew the farmer, and I was waiting for them to go and speak to him, because chances are, I know I could have done that the next day, but I might have got the knockback saying, oh, no, nobody's coming on land. But I knew the guy who were friends with him. So I went and spoke to him. And I went with that guy who knew him then, and we went onto the land. This thing looks like the full moon. His analogy was, he says, at that distance, if you had a double-decker bus in the field, it would be that big. That's how big it looked. Yeah. Now, we went to tri-field meters, to EMF meters. It looks like a ball of flame, Steve. It's on the ground. There's no burnt earth. There's no scorched leaves. Yeah. So clearly, it's a science. It's some kind of technology that we're not understanding, or I'm not, because it's not leaving no traces of its existence.
Yeah.
And I'd not noted that before, Steve. And then I noted on November the 14th, 2019, when myself and a guy called Lee Haywood saw the huge sphere of light in the field with us when we were on the cliff tops. And Lee's analogy was it looked like molten lava. And I'd not really thought, I'd missed a trick. I'd not really thought when we went to where it was,
Yeah.
there's no burn marks. There's
No.
nothing.
It is really weird. The best analogy I can come up with this, and anybody who's done video editing will realize what I'm getting at here. If our reality is that video line, that first video we drag in and it takes up that video line there right across, that is our reality. If the phenomena has represented something to interact with our reality, we bring it in and we put it above the line. We don't put it in the video, right? We put it above, so it's not in the video, but it's part of the video because it's a separate line. Yeah. And this are seen together when we play the line in editing. So it sounds to me like this phenomena can be seen with and is in our reality when it's not in our reality, in a sense. Yeah. It is fringing our reality, the fringe experience. That means that when they want to jump from that line to this line, that's when it becomes physical.
Substance, yeah.
They can do, but they can go like this occasionally. They can go like, and this is the problem, because how many times do we see reports of UFOs now being filmed?
Gone to what's called the East Yorkshire Wolds to observe these lights, the light form phenomena. And I commented quite a few times when you were looking at them, and when I say close, I don't mean like 60 foot away, but when they're actually in the sky below cloud, they look like cartoons. If that makes sense. It looked like a tear in the sky. You're looking at something that's not, it's there.
But it's not right.
And that's another problem that we all face, and I'm sure that we're not alone with this. We really need to develop new words. We haven't got the vocabulary to describe half of this.
Right. There is not. I can only refer to it as those fringe experiences where it demonstrates that there's a partial difference between our reality and the phenomena we're experiencing within our reality. And anybody who's got really heavy into the paranormal, parapsychological tests, there's been times when physical objects during certain experiments have been moved across the table, and you've heard direct voice phenomena from these non-human intelligences, that's what they're referring to now, to move it back. And of course, the experimenters move the object back, and then it starts to move again, 6 foot right across the whole table. And then the sound comes basically to move it, and they can't pick the damn thing up, Paul. It's there. It's casting shadow. It's casting, the reflective areas of it. You would not be able to tell you, looking at it, it's not real. It's there. It's real. You go to put your hand and pick it up. You can't. Your hand goes right through it. You don't feel anything. There's no differences in temperature or anything like that. No tingling sensation. It's as if it doesn't exist until they say, go and do it again, and it's physical. Now, that has happened a number of times. So it's showing that the phenomena can target something and take it out of our reality. But
above the timeline, would just like
above the timeline. Exactly. But it looks to be in it, but it isn't. And if that manipulation can happen within the phenomena, then we can never know for sure whatever's been experienced, it is within our reality, or it's skirting it. It's above the timeline, like you say. Only physical traces might show that it's actually within our timeline. Our reality. It's a tricky one, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, of course, this has led you, obviously, because you're living in that location, led you into obviously looking into some of the strange things that have been reported and disturbances and things like that. Throughout the area of Pemberton and surrounding areas. It's quite a big footprint now. It's probably got larger over the years, hasn't it, Paul?
Yeah, I've said many times, Steve, if I had to stick a pin in a map to say where you thought the epicenter would be, I would say Speeton, but and it's literally along the same cliff top. We're only a mile away. They just merge into one another, simply because the cliffs are pretty inaccessible. There's another little holiday resort further down called Reeton. People don't mistake the name Speeton and Reeton. to get down to the beach of Speeton, that's the best way, because otherwise it's a walk down a pretty inaccessible cliffs. But where am I going with this? The point is that there are so many reports for an area that gets such a little amount of footfall. So I believe that area is the one that's strongest in unexplained phenomena. We got a report from 2018 from a lady called Lisa and her partner, and they'd gone fossil hunting. A lot of fossils down there. There used to be a group in the 1970s and 80s called the Friends of Speeton Clay, because there's this unusual black clay where you get lots of fossils. Oh. But that aside, they'd gone fossil hunting, and they'd lovely summer's afternoon, parked at Reeton, walked along the beach. And as they're walking back, I don't know who saw it first, a partner or Lisa, but there's a lozenge-shaped, rippling, oval, about 3 foot off the ground, about 4 foot deep, 18 to 24 inch wide, just hanging in the air. And not miles away, not up in the sky, just a 3 foot off the beach, and they're walking towards it and can't believe what they're looking at. And I've spoke to her. Myself and Chris Turner, I took Chris to meet this lady, and she says, I'm looking up onto the cliffs thinking, is somebody projecting some kind of strong mirror or something? She says, but it's not bouncing off the beach, it's there independent. She says, we walked around it, we were looking at it, and I don't know whether I'd have been brave enough. I'd have been tempted to try and touch it, I think. She said at one stage before they got to it, a little boy nearly ran into it, and it's not a busy bustling beach. She says, but there was a little boy near it, but he didn't seem to be aware of it, and neither did his parents. And so it's just a strange occurrence once again on the beach. Then you've got cryptid type phenomena, something I've said many times. If you would have asked me probably 8 years ago, 10 years ago about the cryptid, I wouldn't have laughed at people, but I'd have said, I'm not going to invest much time in that. I'm not really that interested in it. But you can't avoid it when people are sending you reports and they're coming back from the same areas, Steve. There's something to this, Do
you find a correlation between remoteness and increased incidence?
I think there are, yeah. But I also note that just like you had experiences in childhood, obviously it wouldn't have been a remote location. I lived in a little village, but for God's sake, it were next door to my parents' bedroom where these things were happening. But I'd take on board what you're saying, remoteness and the incidents are more sort of concentrated in those areas. Is it because whatever this is, like
if it was just random, Paul, we'd be having them in busy areas, busy roads, to busy streets, shopping centers, and all sorts of things. There's enough intelligence to try and deter from being too popular in locations. It always seems to be that we tend to see the more remote, there seems a more consistent amount of things happening in more remote areas than there is, say, really busy areas.
Plus, there's the footprint of the past that seems to echo all of these reports that we're having today. If you, as you look deeper, like we just talked about Winter Hill, you find lots and lots of historic reports as well, and then reports that go back into folklore, and then kind of vague references. And as a researcher, we've got to be careful we don't just put our stamp on it and say, well, that's what it meant. But old literature and old writings that talk of strange occurrences, when we're looking at, when we made Wolflands, the documentary.
Now that's your latest documentary. It's out on, that's on Amazon, isn't it?
That's on Amazon Prime, yeah.
And that just deals with the cryptid side.
The cryptids, yeah. We've mixed a little bit of other phenomena in with it, but primarily it's the cryptids. But you realize that looking in archives, I found a reference to a guy called Howard Brealey, who I think about 121, 122 years ago, he was writing about what he called the Barghest of East Ayton, this huge hound with flaming eyes, almost more like that bioluminescent eyes. And back then, or in years to come, people are still talking about these. We talk about it in the terms of bioluminescence with the eyes. But what's interesting, East Ayton is literally 2 miles from some of the forests where our witnesses were experiencing these huge bipedal hounds with glowing eyes.
Yeah, phantom hounds. Yeah, that's it goes back on. Like, it's a very English tradition, more of it, very much a European and more English tradition.
And the place names. The place names are fascinating. I mean, very close, just to dwell on Wolflands for a moment, very close to, we'll call it Broxer Forest, because these guys, 3 of them, had this terrifying experience in Broxer Forest. But very close, within, I don't know, half a mile, 3/4 of a mile, is a place called Moor Rig. And you think, well, what does that mean? A rig is an outcrop of stone, but Moor is MAW, and we're literally referring to the maw, the jaws, and there's lots and lots of connotations to the wolf within the place names in that area. We've got to understand that.
That's how we used to do it, didn't they? Years back.
Yeah.
Place names were traditionally referencing for some reason as to what things were known there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quite interesting. There's a lot of things like that around near Rendlesham, in the UK. And there's like little towns like kind of Elston and things like that. It's related to the gentry, it's related to the fae.
Right, I see.
The strange small beings there, which used to be seen apparently and reported hundreds of years ago, and the little towns have took the names.
And I wonder if those same locations are still flagging up reports of the small beings. I bet they are. I recently visited Willie Howe, which is in East Yorkshire, again probably 6 miles from my home, and it's one of the most famous burial mounds in England, really, and tumuli, and it's 3,500, 4,000 years they estimate, so it's Neolithic. And there's a story from a guy called William of Newborough, originally from Bridlington. He became the canon, I think, of Bridlington Priory, but he retold a story in the 12th century, which was probably hundreds of years old before then, of the fae and hobs and goblins. And so 12th century, over 900 years ago, of a man. There's 2 villagers sit either side of Willie Howe. There's Burton Fleming and Wold Newton.
Yeah.
And a man had been to visit friends in one of those villages and was travelling back to his own village late in the night, and on horseback. And as he's travelling through the fields, remember 900 years ago there'd have been even less population and no lighting. There's nothing there now, so I can't imagine how remote it would have been then.
Yeah.
And he can hear laughter and merriment, or so this writing goes. And he sees a huge lit up doorway inside the side of the burial mound, comes up alongside on his horse and looks inside and claims that there's a banquet with hobs, the fae, goblins, all manner of strange little creatures inside. And one of them steps forward and offers him a drink. And he described the cup, or the cup was described as a kind of strange shape and of an unknown metal and luster. Well, being savvy to the fae, he realized that if he accepted food or drink from these beings, he would be enslaved to them, or so the story goes. So he tips out the content, makes away on his horse, much to the sort of disapproval of this band of beings and pursuing him. But he got to the village. Where it becomes interesting, and I'm sure there's stories like this in Ireland and all over, but where it becomes interesting is this cup did exist. So this, and it was given to the then king, I think it was Henry the First, the King of England. He wanted the cup, and he owned it for a short time, and then David, the King of Scotland back then, wanted to see it, and he owned it. So where it goes then in the mists of time is not known. Does that mean that it was given to them by hobs, goblins and fairies? We don't know. But it's interesting that this burial mound in East Yorkshire is still producing stories of the strange and unusual. In the first book, Truth Proof 1, Steve, I got Burton Fleming, I got a report, spoke to the guy, an old guy who'd lived in the village. I'm reluctant to say all his life, but I think he'd lived there about 40 years, and he'd take his dog for a walk and pass the burial mound at least 2 or 3 times a week. And then one day he said a little 2-foot being was stood at the side of the mound, about 2 foot tall, dressed in. When he described him, I'm thinking I got the idea it was something like from Lord of the Rings. Seriously,
Yeah.
Brown leathery skin, and black eyes. That's what he described this thing as, just looking at him. He said it had eyes like a crow, and it was just staring at him. Frightened him to death, never went back that way, and he's not been, I wouldn't say he's not been back since, but he'd not been after when he spoke to me, and that's going back to probably 2016. So can all of these people be lying? Can the people from the past through to the present all be misidentifying and lying? I believe that the vast majority of people who come forward with these reports, let's face it, and they've got nothing to gain but ridicule, are actually telling us the truth in a lot of instances.
And it's interesting because they have to tell somebody. When I've seen things and I think to myself, I shouldn't have even seen that. I mean, I've seen a banshee. I'm crying out loud. A banshee. What's the chances of seeing a banshee flying as well? And of course interact in a way of watching us.
Is this in Ireland?
No, that was over here, mate. That was Winter Hill of all places.
Really?
Believe that? And I wasn't on my own. But the thing is, that when it's sometimes it grabs you in a certain way that you don't act. I mean, I'm going to jump. When I saw this thing, I normally would have the car would have come to a stop. I would have been out the vehicle, and I would pursue this thing because it was literally right there.
Yeah.
But I wasn't allowed to act until probably about half a mile down the road, and then it's kind of, wow, what just happened? Did you just see that? And of course, yeah, we just saw it, but we weren't allowed to act it out. Just like these, we're cognitively limited by the phenomena. Sometimes it grabs us and doesn't release us until you're down the road. You're not going to be interacting
before you're able to gather enough data to establish the proof of its existence, shall we say?
Exactly.
Because we get that, don't we? We get the common sort of phrases coming from people who think that this subject is all a bit too much for them, and they'll say, well, everybody's got a phone, why don't you take a photograph?
Well, I didn't even think to.
No.
And that's the problem. It's like I wasn't released from its grip cognitively until half a mile down the road, and then all that, why didn't I act normally? And it was really strange. And we've had people like that before, even holding cameras and not took a photo. Or they got it around their chest on a strap and not took a photo. And I think in many cases it does that. But when you experience that, you'd think, I wasn't going mad because I didn't see it on my own. And it's real at the time. So therefore, you feel like you want to tell people, but at the same time, you feel a bit, are people going to believe it? I totally get it. Anything will go, anything goes. If I get a call and somebody says, I've seen this craziest stuff, I don't give a shit. I say, look, I don't care. I said, I understand. People can see some weird stuff out there. And if they do, I understand you need to be able to talk about it, despite how crazy it could be, because anything goes. And I will not think that is too way out there now.
I got a report, and I've spoke to the lady. I've not spoke to her husband. He's completely skeptical, a complete skeptic, but he knows what he saw, which has pleased her. And I've changed this lady's name. I call her Sasha.
Yeah.
And it's from the 12th of April. And this couple were travelling to Whitby over the moors. Yeah. And they just passed Fylingdales.
Oh, yeah, that way. Yeah.
RAF Fylingdales. About 9 p.m. It had just got dark, and they're in a VW transporter. They've just come round a sharp bend called the Devil's Elbow, and there used to be a pub at the bottom of that elbow called the Salters Gate Inn, which has got stories of hauntings and things attached to it. So they're coming up that road. They've just passed Fylingdales, and she saw it first. She never said a word because of her husband, who didn't believe in this kind of thing. And she said this creature, this thing, that her analogy was, she said it looked like branches that had been carefully put together. So just when you think you've heard everything, she says, and it ran across the road. It had got backward-facing knees. She said, and it was very thin. She says, it was so tall, the headlights didn't pick its head up. She says, and it ran across the road in a really fluent motion. There were triangular signposts on the road. She says, and we think that signpost was about 4 or 5 foot. She said, so it would have been 7 to 8 foot tall. She says, now I looked, and it went straight over a fence, all effortless. and it were about 200 yards away when they saw it in headlights, and as they're just slowly going up this road. She said, now I thought I daren't tell him because he's just going to say, oh, you what a dear. And she says, and her husband just, and I'll not swear, but he just went, did you just bleep see that?
Yeah.
And she says, I felt validated. Said, what did you see? Said, so they're discussing it. And when they got to the destination, she learnt on the internet and had a look at what for some things to give a comparison of what she saw. And she asked him to draw it. And she said, right, show me what you've drawn. And it looked almost insectoid, this running across. Now, I've got a friend who lives in Filingthorpe, which is close to Fylingdales, Jeremy. And Jeremy went there with his camera the next day. We found the signpost. We found the board. The board, it's a triangular one. It's 6 foot. So it makes this thing at least 8 foot tall, because she says it were 2 feet taller than that. I've contacted Fylingdales. I haven't gone into detail. I've just explained that something very unusual was seen running very close to the military base, and it might be of interest to you, and there could be dash cam footage, and I'm still I'll not hold my breath. I'm still waiting, So these things, what's interesting, it's ran towards Gothland. And Gothland's got a rich history of strange creatures. The Guy Trash, which is a huge bipedal hound or fur-covered hound with glowing eyes. So we've got all these stories localized to certain areas. But fascinating that we're 400 or 500 yards from area Fylingdales.
Yeah.
If they're not misidentifying something, we don't have red deer up there, and they assure me it were on 2 legs. I'm just thinking of something of that height that could go across the road, and thinking of antlers. If they're not misidentifying something, then surely one of the most secretive or sensitive military bases certainly in the UK would be aware that something's on and around the peripheral of their land, which spans miles. It's not just the area of the radar head.
Yeah. So, you can't list everything. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of variations, and this is what makes you sort of start to lean to, well, are they acting in pretty much the same way? Well, yeah, they, it doesn't, despite what they look like, their actions, it's that great saying, actions speak louder than words.
Yeah. And
when you look at the actions, you see the similarities, but when you look at what they are looking like, you don't see the similarities, because there's this super variation. So that's what kind of led me to think that, well, maybe we're dealing with something that is just, like I said, there's no model for it. It can be anything. And sometimes it does. I did get asked a question about the Greys, because the Greys have been on the scene for a while now, haven't they, Paul? But if you go back in time, prior to all the books, prior to all the imagery of alien Greys, before the internet, before people were really discussing about them, they didn't exist so much. I'm just thinking, this is the longest entity, stereotypical entity that's been seen. But I'm wondering if it's down to us.
I knew where you were going with. Yeah, go on.
What do you think about? Do you think that it's because it's in our conscious?
Do you think we're creating these things, or do you think that the phenomena, well, using that, with throwing the net wide, is giving us what we want, or the shape of what we're developing in our minds?
I think we're giving it an easy path.
Yeah.
I think to formulate into the Greys now is it's like the easiest thing to do, because it's so much in our conscious mind. It's on the internet. People have got t-shirts, clothing ranges, all sorts of different things now.
Yeah.
Computers, even, with the Alienware, you can't get away from that imagery. And I think it's so easy to stumble onto that and say, oh, that's what's in their consciousness, so therefore I will be.
Yeah.
If you go back in time, though, before there was this widespread of imagery, you got so much variation.
Yeah.
We got constant variations every 5-10 years, and then all of a sudden it starts getting into this era of we can distribute the alien grey and keep it in our consciousness. It's like, oh, there's longevity.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Because, I mean, and no disrespect to the researchers and the experiencers, of the 50s and 60s, but you would hear people relaying accounts of the beings landing, and they'd get out of their spacecraft. And I've heard high profile researchers from the past saying, and I could see he was in charge because he had a little epaulet on his shoulder there, saying what rank he was. And I mean, I think that's quite ridiculous, but no disrespect to the man.
What was then though, Paul? What was going on at that time? You've got your B movies, your 50 B movies, haven't we? And all that sort of alien, and we had those slogans, and
are we moving
sometimes?
Are we moving the goalpost too far to think that maybe that's what they were showing us because that's what we wanted?
Well, it might be what we might have perceived to be right at that time. I mean, the phantom airships, just prior to the real airships, you've got the ghost rockets and the Foo Fighters during the Second World War, which looked like rockets and tracer fire. It seems to be a correlation somehow. We're involved somewhere along this line. Our social understanding and how we perceive this phenomenon, we have an attachment with this. And I think it's very clever how it wants to mold itself to our perceptions, and sometimes completely the opposite, and it's like we've got to deliver absurdity, and it is. It's exactly how Jacques Vallée said. It's like he called it. It's like a psychological warfare that's taking place on humanity, because these things are delivering themselves in so many different ways. It purposely causes confusion through the absurdity.
Yeah.
She can't connect the dots. And it's like it doesn't want the dots to be connected in many cases.
Do you think then, and I know all we can do is speculate, but do you think there's a much bigger picture over probably not just hundreds, but thousands of years of where they want us to go? Is it, do we consider ourselves more important within this than we actually are? I don't mean Steve Mera or Paul Sinclair. I mean the human race.
Yeah, I think so. I think, I think it's been going on you don't have to be anybody special. It can target individuals anytime, usually from childhood onwards, and interact with them. I think it can lay paths and change the process of how things might be done as we move forward into the future.
Do you know the reason I say that, or part of the reason, is that it targets certain individuals, and I were never the sharpest tool in the box when it came to maths and English and things. So you would think that if this intelligence wanted to lead humanity in a different direction, or the direction it wants it to go, it would target the greatest minds of the world.
Yeah. But it doesn't do
well. It's not doing.
Sometimes it does. I mean, I see that, some of the greatest achievements in regarding inventions or the space program and many things had their hand in the pot. They have delivered information and helped us progress in certain ways, in technological ways. But the dangers of that is that we supersede ourselves in technology, but psychologically we're lagging. We're lagging the humanistic, the process of how we act in the world. That needs to develop, really, to be honest with you, so much more. But the problem is that when we're looking at the whole picture, and you've done what, 4 books now on?
Well, 5 if we count night people.
5 with night people now. And I'm sure there's probably more to come, because it's never endless. It never ends. We haven't joined it at the beginning. We haven't joined it at the end. We just dropped onto the road and have started monitoring the traffic.
That's correct. Yeah.
We were looking at it and saying, okay, well, we're pointing out there is traffic. And this is the variations of the traffic that's been happening, because we're stood on the road now, rather than sometimes just walking by it, never even looking. I think what we find, and we've noted this through experiments, that there is a quick path. You can interact with phenomena. You can go out and you can be looking. You can go out and not be. You can spend many a time in places looking phenomena, and you'll get nothing. And then sometimes you will do, and you'll get it to a point where you might even have more than one incident at night, and that's because you've gathered its attention. but it's always seems to have been random. But when you start to do the checks and start looking and doing some experiments, there is a fast path. And the fast path is, believe it or not, and it shouldn't exist, is the esoteric invocation process. When you do that, and I wouldn't always advise it because it's not always good,
No.
but it's the quick path to results, and you will get results. But it's not the good path. The good path is to put the time in, do the work, and see what works best for you, how you can build up a process of where you might be able to experience phenomena without being affected by it. Because you have to start, there's a rim of it's the edge of a cliff, Paul.
You're so right, and there's the scenarios where you take different groups of individuals, and or a certain individual seems to evoke a reaction from whatever it is you're trying to connect with. I noted earlier Lee Hayward, in November 2019, 14th of November. I believe that sphere of light that we saw in the field was because of Lee.
Yeah.
Myself, Bob Brown, lots of other people have been there. Chris has been up there, to Chris Turner. Nothing. Chris managed to see it the first time he went. Is that just pure luck, or is that something? Look, we're here. We're just going to show you this. Lee Hayward went up as a skeptic, a really nice guy though, not somebody who's just going to be, I don't know, condescending and rude about it. He just wanted to look for answers and thought that there was some kind of scientific explanation, and he came away absolutely baffled. But I believe it was for Lee. So once again, I'm sort of coming full circle back to the fact that whatever we're dealing with, everything is on its terms.
He definitely is, yeah. I mean, he can totally ignores if he wants to, but I think I do know that that process how can that exist? I mean, what we're dealing with then, Paul, because it's the big debates all around the world now at the moment. It's very interesting what's happening. Is that your work and our work and more other is being illuminated now because the narratives are starting to change back to what we believe is more appropriate about the loss of the extraterrestrial hypothesis, the naming of non-human intelligences now rather than ETs, the referencing to interdimensional, it's even been at the Pentagon level, and the metaphysicality of this phenomenon. So you've got this narrative change. A lot of people are going, oh, okay, let's look into that area and realize it's already occupied by yourself, your work, and our work, and numerous others. What's interesting is that why should there be any esoteric interaction, relationship between this phenomenon? This is why some people in the US are thinking, oh, it's all satanic. It's all these things are all demons and stuff. But I've always tried to put the point forward is that I think even that itself is part of the phenomena as the mask.
Yeah.
It's still all the same thing. Are we ever seen his true face?
I don't think we are. And you, I mean, if to use yours and Barry's analogy is that whatever we're dealing with is just presenting and putting on a different mask. And how did I term it at a conference once? UFO researchers see UFOs, ghost hunters see ghosts.
That's it.
And everything in between. And for so many years, we've all been sort of focused on our little pigeonhole of research, whereas we've missed the big picture. I don't think you have, and I don't think Barry has, but what I'm saying is a lot of people have just focused on the UFO phenomena, the cryptid phenomena, and not realizing that it's all bleeding through into each other. And you said, what are we dealing with, a few minutes ago, and are we dealing with just one intelligence or many intelligences all employing the same type of exotic science from behind the firewall? Are they all using the same principles to contact, or is it just one, reluctant to use the word, Godhead that's been all things to all men?
Well, it's true. I mean, if you look right through all the research about this phenomenon in its many variations and forms and interactions, it has godly power. It does. Everything that you would think that God might be able to do, it has godly power, to change our reality in some cases. So what is it? And that is the big question. We don't know. I think we're dealing with the source,
Yeah.
whatever that source is, um, because you can't even get people from the other side of the world to act the same. How would we have so much if they were all various different thousands and thousands of different types of interdimensional entities with their own opinions and their own behaviors? Then why would we have so much similarity? We can't even get people on the other side of the world to act the same as
No.
we do because of the belief and the structure and everything else. And yet they always tend to do the same things. I mean, they might have very similar crafts, but they're completely different beings, or they act completely differently. Sometimes those things aren't even right. They've got
But is it the same intelligence as
yeah,
Steve and the same beings that's the word you've just used that are just adapting to the different cultures in the world around the world and presenting to these other races, uh, these other peoples. Lost for words then.
yeah.
In the way that their culture would perceive these things. I spoke to a guy recently who had a bedroom visitation as a little boy. It'll make sense this in a moment. And he said we were originally from Halifax, and then we moved. I think he said Wales, and to quite a large semi-detached house with a garage on the side. His bedroom was in the garage. He said nobody wanted to sleep in it. This guy was called Bal. Of the Muslim faith, nice guy. I've spoken to him, and he's telling me that he was in the early hours of the morning. Young boy, he says, and he said, when your mum will give you a shake and say, "Come on, time to get up," he says, and you just kind of go and you're up.
Yeah.
He said, something woke me up in the early hours of the morning. He says, and I were instantly on my elbows looking down the bed. He says, and at the bottom of the bed in this garage bedroom, there's a little being walking across, and it's looking at me, and it's terrified. It's as frightened of me as I am of it. He said, and I can see it's got a pointy hat on, it's got a beard on. He said, I can't see anything from the shoulders, so let's assume it's got some kind of cloak. He said, but it was a surprise that I could see it as it was, he said, he spoke in my mind and said, you're not supposed to see me. But he believes that interaction was the jinn, not the being. He believes that it was a jinn, that woke him and played a trick on him and played a trick on this interdimensional, we'll call it, this little elemental being that was passing through his bedroom. He said he thought that there was a prank being played on him. I mean, I know it's a strange story to share as we do this, but it's just different cultures and different people's belief system of everything to this man, and no disrespect to anybody of the Muslim faith. But a lot of people place from the Muslim faith place a lot of emphasis on the unexplained element of the strangeness on the jinn.
Yeah, they do.
Are we dealing with the same thing, but just a different name?
Seems to be, because to ward away jinn in the Middle East, they were utilizing hematite, and hematite is about 92% iron or something like that. They were utilizing iron to try and ward away, the jinn incidents. In the medieval times, they were using iron.
I know you're going to say iron stakes into the fields.
Iron stakes into the fields.
Horseshoes on your door.
But why, if they are separate, then why is it not even to the point where introducing iron as a pendant for people who are having contact type experiences with the greys, and they're not very nice, you don't want them. I was on a call. They got in touch with me. The Foundation of Research of Extraterrestrial, something like that. It's the one that the astronaut Edgar Mitchell kind of formulated, and they do a lot of work in regarding the alien abduction, alien contact type experiences, about statistics of those people who are having those experiences and introducing the methodology of sort of them wearing iron, had a certain amount of suppression for the phenomena. So you think, if you're dealing with all these different things, then why are they all seemingly affected by certain things? Or why do they not sometimes like UV light? Why do they not sometimes like iron in the environment? What is it? It goes back so many, many years, that we've forgotten. we drive past churches with wrought iron gates, cemeteries and stuff to separate the realms, and we don't even think about where does the idea come from.
Yeah,
and God knows, because it goes back.
But the idea of iron is almost a perfect example of the different cultures applying their belief system of why we're using it. And you know, the jinn, and we'd have a different interpretation, but ultimately it's probably the same phenomena that's interacting within us all, or through us all.
Yeah, I agree. And this is when you look at the commonalities, you just start to go through a session of looking at the commonalities between phenomena, it reveals itself for what it is. But what's interesting is that, you know, I always see there's a common indicator there that there's paranormal things that have also been associated. Do you get a lot of that also reported in these areas, Paul, where you do your research? Just a UFO, but the cryptids, but paranormal?
The paranormal as well, without a doubt, and noise, the sort of invisible voice phenomena, you know, like disengaged voices that are speaking out, you know, and we'll say, did you hear that? When you've got 2 or 3 people saying, yeah, we heard it, and they actually know what word that was said, and yeah, we get a lot of that. I mean, I'd use Hunmanby as a perfect example, and for anybody not familiar with the location, just Google it. It's Hunmanby, Hunmanby.
Yeah.
Hun, and then man, but by. Apologies for that, people. So back then there was a small industrial estate in 1996, 97, 98. And the guys on the industrial estate, which they were repairing, spraying, sign writing, high class vehicles and buses, open top buses and things in a great big warehouse. And they suddenly started encountering or experiencing, first of all, it were poltergeist type phenomena. Before they took over the unit, it was an engineering unit, and there was boxes of washers and nuts and bolts all over the place, sides of the unit, big enough to get double-decker buses and big wagons all the way through one side to the other. Just give you an idea of the size of it, and probably get 4 or 5 in one go. Says, and you'd hear this smack on side of building, and you'd look, and as soon as you'd look that way, there's another one that way, and there's 3 men working in this unit, and this is when it started to build. It's almost amoeba-ish. It's got your attention. Soon as you start to focus on it a little bit more, it's, I don't know whether it feeds off your energy or it's right. The snowball is building now, and we're just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. He says, and it got to the stage, June, July and August, 96, 97, 98. Why them months? They don't know. It got to the stage where you would be walking and suddenly a pile of gravel would drop in front of you.
Yeah.
And there's no rooms above. There's nothing. Apart from, and there were gravel outside, but it says, a paint tin lid had just dropped. All the power would just suddenly get right bright in the workshop. And bang, they trip the fuses, the radio's plugged in, it carries on playing. We'd go outside. What these guys did, Steve, this was their second job. They were young men back in 90s, forging a living, bringing up the family, so they'd have daytime jobs, and they'd go there between 5 and 6 on a night and work till 10, 12, sometimes on a weekend they'd work till first light and go home. And this was happening. They'd got the boss, we'll call him the boss. I've spoke to him as well, but he didn't want his name using. And then we've got Andy and Dave, who I still see them. I see Andrew quite often. And he said we'd go outside in winter, because we did it at least 5 days a week on a night. And there'd be huge footprints on his boot and on his roof and on his bonnet. Huge bare footprint.
That's like the old tales of the devil's footprints and stuff.
He said it were ridiculous because, imagine driving an old car.
The roofs as well. Yeah. I mean, it's like that old traditional story.
No damage to the vehicle though. So once again, this arcs back to Steve Mera, your analogy that is it actually in it, just partially in our existence? Is it above the timeline? It's done enough to leave a footprint, but it's not. This footprint's big. There's no damage to car. There's no dint in bonnet or in roof. Nothing. You'd come out and you'd have piles of gravel. The boss said to me, because I went and spoke to him as well, and he said one night the other 2 had left, and I'm locking the gates up. He says it's about 3, 4 in the morning. He says, and I just got this terrible feeling that I just an overwhelming fear. And I turned around, and in front of me, there's this monstrous figure. I can just see head blending into shoulders. He's describing almost a silhouette of something like a Bigfoot.
Yeah.
He says, and I just went back to the fence. He said, and it just turned and walked off into the night. All that kind of phenomena that was building and building. And then in August 1998, the roller shutters were, first of all, they'd found a grave. They'd found an old grave marker because they started clearing land at the back.
Yeah.
And there's something, a little girl from the 1800s. He says, and Andy says to me now, he says, we were probably a bit disrespectful because when we found it, we didn't do anything with it. It was just moving about workshop. We moved it about the workshop. It was wood, made of hardwood. And eventually, I think they got the vicar from, or the you can't quite remember whether a vicar or undertakers came and took it away. And I've contacted them as well, and I've not been able to get any movement on where it ended up. He said, but because they'd found the grave with marker and disturbed it, they attributed all the poltergeist activity to this spirit of the child. But it grew, it grew and grew. And he said, and then there's first the night before in August 1998, he says, the boss, we'll call him the boss because I've got to be mindful I don't use his name. He went outside for a smoke, and there was a bus breaking yard where they broke bus parts up and things further down, about two units down, and they knew them. They're still there. Some people, they remember this. Yeah. He says, and we're all having a cigarette. He says, and we could see coming in from the sea, which would be 2 miles away at Hunmanby, what's called Hunmanby Gap, 3 huge triangles just slowly traveling. He says, and they were blacker than the sky. He says, and just when we thought they were going to get over top of us and we were going to get a proper look, he said, the sky just became stars, and he said, they're just gone. Whether they some kind of camouflaged, he says, they're just gone. That was that night. The following night, and this is where it's interesting because I think there's missing time. We can't get to the bottom of it. There's 3 of them in compound. Dave's mum and dad's been to visit them. They used to come from Bridlington, which is about 6 miles away, a few nights a week and spend a bit of time with their son. He was youngest of the lot of these guys, and they'd bring him a flask through or sit and have a few sandwiches. They'd gone home. We'll deal with them in a moment. They'd gone home. He said, roller shutter doors are up about 6 foot, he says, and I find myself stood looking down into the compound. And Andrew's exact words, he says, it had to be a film set. He said, it couldn't have been real. I said, why? He said, there's all like lights flashing everywhere and there's mist and there's this. And Andy, I can hear him saying it. It was just typical flying saucer. He says, it was a flying saucer. He says, with a little bubble on top. He says, and there's a being inside it. I can see him. He says, I can see it. He says, it can't be real. He says, next thing I know, I'm walking back. And if you're not familiar with industrial units, you've usually got the big roller shutters and a small door at the side that's everyday use. Yeah. He says, and I open that door, military, grab me, drop me to the floor. I know we've come a long way from the poltergeist. Guys, but look, we may as well roll with this for a moment. Drop me to the floor and stay there if you know what's good for you, and all that. Then I get Dave's story. He finds himself stood down there. They're never together. It's odd. And he said, and I'm looking, and I said, did you see the little being that Andy saw? He said, no, there were 3. They were stood outside of the object. He said they were like lightning coming from it. There's cracks of big static and smoke. You can see I get animated because it's such a brilliant account, this. And he said there's 3 of them. He says, and if they'd got clothing on, it was something like wetsuits because it was so tight to the bodies. That's where Dave's story ends because he's walking back to the door. He's dropped by people with guns, armed men with guns. But they don't talk about being together. Then the boss. I ask him, I loaded my question because I realised it was limited what I was going to get from this guy. So after I'd introduced myself and give him the information I'd got off the other 2, he started to relay things. And so I left. My last question to him was, and did you see the beings? And he just said, well, there was someone there. There was something there. I'll give you that. And then I said to him, well, Andy said that he saw you walk down to it. which he did. He did,
Uh-huh.
and he just looked at me with real brown haunting eyes. This guy, and he went, and there were a pause, and then he went, I really don't know what he's on about. And I feel like he probably did, but that's the end of that. But that is not where it stops, because when Dave's mum and dad went home, they were stopped. There was a roadblock. We'll say a military roadblock, but all the vehicles were black.
All right.
Black Land Rovers, black vans. They were removed from their vehicle. They were taken into the back of a large black van, where they saw military personnel from head to toe, even with masks on, armed. Yeah. And they were just shown pictures of themselves, shown pictures of their home, shown pictures of various members of the family, and told, if you're told anything, if you ever repeat anything, you're going to be told. They didn't. I don't think they actually said something's going to happen to you. But no. I think if that had happened to Paul Sinclair or Steve Mera, we'd have known that there's a threat implied there.
Yeah.
So basically, to recap, and Hunmanby, we could have actually done 2 hours on Hunmanby, Steve. Yeah. So to recap, perhaps we should do that in another podcast from start to finish. Or live stream if we should do that. So to recap, it started with poltergeist activity and slowly built.
How it built. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? How it starts. Yeah. Poltergeist stuff starts with a lot of stuff. I mean, when we initiated some of the experiments, it started with spiritual. I go like, yes, okay, maybe. I'm very loosely on the word spiritual. Into the poltergeist stuff, through the poltergeist stuff, into the non-human intelligence area, and then into the the interactive manifestation process. But the poltergeist phenomenon was part of that. It is in there. It seems to be part and parcel of the process of reaching out. Or this, so you have 5 books out, Paul. Tell me a little bit about your show. Yeah, your Truth Proof.
Yes. Truth Proof live stream, just pretty much same as yours, Steve.
We get a week. Is it? How often is it out?
We do one on Thursdays. And we try and get a guest speaker on, and you've been kind enough to do that, I think 3 times for us, and we're really appreciative of that. And Trey Hudson in the next week or so. I'm going to say this week, but I don't know when this is going out. So we usually do Thursdays. And we've got one on Sunday where we just take questions from the audience. But it's a great interactive chat. We have between 1 and 300 people in chat. And my life's gone in the direction I didn't think it would go, as regards from writing the first book to where I am now. And I'm no different to the people who are watching us and listening to this now. Just all approachable.
Always takes like that. The interest grows over a period of time, especially when you're working in an area that is being illuminated now. It's like people are playing catch up. Oh yeah. I mean, we've been lied to for the last God knows how many years, 80 years, 90 years, whatever. That ruse, that idea, that narrative it's run its course, mate. It's now people are saying, well, if it isn't that, then what the hell is it? And where are they coming from? And when you start to look at the research that you're doing, and I've done on numerous other people, the answer is there, that it opposes the narrative of what they've been telling us for the last God knows how.
Absolutely, it really does. And I mean, you've gone past that, and a lot of other people, Barry Fitzgerald's gone past it. It's not a belief now, because we know your experiences, although you've only touched on them briefly, they leave you in no doubt. You don't have to believe. When it doesn't annoy me, but when people said, do you believe in UFOs, or do you believe we're being visited? Maybe not visited because they're already here, but I don't have to believe. When I've actually experienced it, I don't have to believe.
You need to believe. I do find, though, that sometimes it's a bit like the faith apparitions. If without belief, some people don't experience. It's interesting.
Yeah, good point.
And I talked to a lot of people that say, no, I'm a skeptic. I said, well, why? So I've never witnessed anything. Well, I'm thinking to myself, why is so many skeptics never witnessed anything? Why do you not get somebody who's witnessed something who's a skeptic?
Yeah, well, you don't, do you?
You don't, do you? And the fact is that, do you need it, though? I mean, it's like faith apparitions. Are you going to see the apparitions of something that might be a biblical origin or something, or religious connotation if you don't have a religious belief.
Yeah, so once again that comes full circle to what you spoke about earlier. It's giving us, if we come at it from a religious narrative, it's giving us what we actually want to see.
True. I mean, just more recently, because of all the stuff that's been going on in the US over the last 18 months now or whatever, the US, the UAP congressional hearings, all the news, all the things that have been talked about, shows, documentaries, news nights, the amount of UFO reported incidents have quadrupled in the US. Now, why all of a sudden are people seeing more of them? Well, could it be that their belief situation regarding the subject matter, because it's everywhere across the US, is slightly altered and shifted, which means the perception of belief in regarding these things means that they allow themselves to be able to experience it more often? I don't know. But it's interesting to note, though, that maybe not only seeing is believing, but believing is
is seeing. Yeah. And I've actually said that myself, Steve, and I'm totally on board with it. And, when you get people in high power talking about the possibility or actually not just the possibility, saying we are being visited by something of unknown origin, then it alters the populace as a whole, the population. Once they hear somebody in authority saying it's real, then their belief set or mindset changes as well, doesn't it? So I mean, I think you're onto it there when you say that. Is it our belief in this? And I don't know.
It's it's got a tie with us. It's like it demonstrates each and every time there's some form of connection with the experiences and how we experience it. And I know you've said this as well before, but the more you start to delve into it, the more it seems to be like a virus in many, many cases, because viruses evolve and they learn and, and they know how to target certain people. And because of the certain conditions, hard to know what the conditions are between people, but you know what? It seems like a virus on many occasions.
Well, it would talk about the what people term as the hitchhiker effect. Not exactly same as what the analogy you've just been talking about, but I tend to think that it's only a play on words, but I think it's as quick as thinking about it that you can connect with this unknown other. So if you've been to these locations, and many people have been to areas where we'll call them the areas of high strangeness, and then started having strange things happening in and around their homes, and the hitchhiker effect, I get the idea that people sometimes might want to imply that this phenomenon somehow kind of attached itself to the individual, and I just think it's more of the thought process. I spoke to a guy who'd had a cryptid type encounter when he was 18 years old, and he's now in his 40s. And he said, just thinking about it, he thought he'd woke it up. He thought he'd somehow evoked it again. He was getting feelings of anxiousness and anxiety. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it, if that's all it is, a thought process away at all times, if you can create the right conditions.
Yes.
You
are right. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I know that from some of the early experiments that I was involved in, where we did have communications with things referred to themselves as non-human intelligences. We had those communications with us. But it's exciting when you reach that point.
Yeah.
When you finalize your circle, it takes months to finalize to get the right people. You have to fine tune it to the results. And after months of work, and you do get that, and you sustain. What's interesting, once you actually have sustainability with that contact, getting through to that point takes a better time. You can always go back to it and start where you left off. You don't have to build it again. It's like a telephone line. It's always open.
Do you know, it's and the analogy reads true. It's not unexplained phenomena, but Arnold Schwarzenegger, because it's the power of the mind. He called it when he laid off his exercise and his training for 10, 15 years, I don't think people actually ever switch off from it, but not the dedication that he did before. But once he applied the mindset to enter the Mr. Olympia again, who would have thought we would be talking about Mr. Olympia on a paranormal podcast? But he said muscle memory. It came back really, really quick. Whereas somebody at the outset would have to train and think about this, but almost as though, well, he call it muscle memory. And he grew. I mean, maybe a silly analogy, but
there's a lot more connection to it than we even know. We're still learning about ourselves in regards to the world of phenomena. I mean, we kind of understand ourselves sociably and how we deal with other people, but not when it's interacting with phenomena. Well, at least that's humans in a whole new area that we're looking at and what's happening to us. And when we get to that point of communications, and it's exciting to have those experiences. You want to do them every day. You're like, oh my God, it's incredible. You can't believe what you're experiencing. But then, we started to have things come home. And so protocols have to put in place, and it was referred to as the 2 in 5 or the 3 in 7. And that means that's the only times you can do it 2 times in 5 days or 3 times in 7 days and no more. Because any more than that, you're enticed sometimes. You get things kind of coming back home, and that's what was these respite protocols put in there purposely.
Yeah.
But there's so much. We're still scratching the surface, even though that we are, compared to many others, ahead of the game to some degree. But we're still like students trying to learn what we're trying to learn.
I struggle to get any firm grip on what it is we're actually dealing with, and I'm not saying other people haven't got a better understanding of it than me, because some people will have, but I mean, you touched on it earlier. It's still exciting. It still gives me a buzz to go to these locations, and I said, true unexplained phenomena does not present to order unless it's on its terms. But there's still that expectancy. You still go to these places. You still get the buzz of talking to somebody like Steve Mera or somebody like Barry or anybody invested in the subject, because we can all learn so much, and there might be something you've said that's little hint of something that just, hey, I'm going to have a go at this, or I'll apply this.
Yeah, it's like this whole, whatever the phenomenon is, it's like dealing in espionage. You're dealing with agents that can't be seen, and the whole aspect is not to be detected. And they're damn good. It's damn good at what it does. But there are things coming out which helps us, and this might help us also at some point, Paul, is that there's a new piece of instrument that's coming out. It's been utilized in places like Japan and where they've had nuclear leaks and stuff and things like that. And it's known as an anomalous radiation meter, but it's a visual meter, and it's about so big, and it's got a screen on it. And as you're looking, it's got a camera on the front, and it's recording. You can move it around, and it's showing pockets. It shows up on the screen, red radiation areas.
Really?
Active areas that you are visually be able to see as you're walking around. People are using them in these locations, where they go in to check to see if Chernobyl and places like that, these towns were affected. They're incredible. No, they're not in the public domain just yet. I've been in contact with the people that make them. They're not super expensive, but do you know what? I will absolutely guarantee when we're out there, there is pockets of stuff which indicates where things are happening. We're not even visibly seeing it.
Yeah.
Because this whole phenomena is designed to be outside the scope of our seeing. So we have to rely on some really good pieces of equipment. That is going to be available soon in the public domain. So as soon as I find out how we get hold of one, I'll let you know, because I think that will start to reveal some very interesting things.
That's fascinating, and I would like to learn more about that. And while you're on with that, on a similar vein, and I haven't got the date in front of me, but please contact me when we've done this. Give me a call the next day or so. I'll send you some screen grabs, and you might want to add them to the presentation.
Yeah,
we'll say.
Absolutely.
2 weeks ago, a good friend of mine called Tom Waters came to visit us at the Clifftops, and his daughter. And Jeremy from Thorpe came down. He's in a prime location. We'll get to my story in a moment. Jeremy, living near Fylingdales, but where he's had his experience was at Bempton. So he keeps coming down. So he came down, and so there's me, and then there's a guy called Peter on the Clifftops with us. And I've got a pulsar thermal camera. And obviously you can pick each signatures up and you can put it into different color modes. You've got hot, black, and various other ones. So we're using the pulsar camera. So Paul's got his pulsar camera, and I'm scanning the distant hillside, the same hillside where Mick Sigson says he saw the UFO land, the same hillside where we've seen the square of white light, lots of sort of phenomena attached to this localized spot. And I see a huge oval of glowing amber.
What, on the camera?
On the camera. So as I'm saying this now, you'll need a frame capture of what I'm talking about. Otherwise it won't make sense. And it'll make me look stupid because I'm just saying something I can't back up what I'm saying. So I'm looking at it and I'm saying I can see this huge heat signature, and I hand-peaked the thermal. I and Jeremy, Tom and his daughter, I think they've just gone up a little walk up the cliffs. So Jeremy's walking down. So I film him going down. You can see his heat signature. And I would have thought we're looking at probably quarter of a mile away. It's on the hill. It's big.
Yeah.
So he's on his phone. So he's got a psionics camera in his hand, and he's saying, "Whereabouts is it?" And you can see him walk across. Now this is a thermal camera, people. So the image is strong, but quarter of a mile away, a little bit longer, a human, a figure. Is you can see it, but it's just a vague glowing stick. Which looks...
Is it really? So
he can see him, and he says, "Whereabouts is it?" And I'm saying he's on the phone to me, and he sent me the psionics footage so we can hear him talking. He says, "Whereabouts is it?" I says, "You're in front of it," and he goes, "I can't see anything," and he's putting his torch on. Couldn't see it. No. And what were we dealing with? So with this, Tom and his daughter walked down. Pete's not been very well, so we had a steady walk down, left the equipment, the bulk of it, midpoint, and then I went to meet them, and can't see it. It's not there. No. The huge glowing oval is not in the visible spectrum, if that's the word. And so that was a strange one.
Must be something there then. It was generating heat.
Yeah, but what? And it was a solid. It weren't some kind of dissipating, misty kind of, I don't know.
Did it just dissipate slow, Paul, or did it disappear?
It just weren't there. It had just gone when we went down. But I've got it on film really strong. It's on film when Jeremy's talking to me on the phone. And he's saying, "Where is it?" I said, "You stood in front of it." And as I'm saying, "You stood in front of it," I'm filming it. And he is. When I say in front of it, it could be 20, 30 yards away. But we've got pretty powerful torches. And when you're in this location, and it could be the same at Winter Hill, I've never been, but there's nothing there. There's no street lights. You've got the North Sea and 300-foot cliffs to the left, and you've got farmland to the right. There's nothing there. So just a strange one. It does starts getting into like a bit of Project Doorway stuff. I mean, that's how it got in. We were identifying pockets, areas where visually and knowingly undetectable, which were doorways that seemingly are opening for the phenomena to seep into the reality, and sometimes closing. But they were, you couldn't see them, and when certain pieces of equipment might detect them. And that's when we ended up realizing that, that there's a lot of the UFO phenomena manifesting in key areas like that, So the whole idea of these things are coming from space and stuff is very geological associated. And cliffs are also very well known for their areas, Yeah. And what's fascinating is it's in an area where many things have presented before. And you touched on then these things potential that in the past people would be saying, "Oh, they can't possibly traverse the vast distances of space, so they can't be here." It's so many millions of light years away. But we know I think we just crushed that argument by saying, look, if people are seeing and experiencing this, then it's here. But let's look out to sea, and let's look below the term that I've used, the sub-universe, the submerged universe.
Yeah.
There's what do they say, Steve? 95% of the oceans of the world are relatively unknown, or we don't know that much about it. So what the potential's there for something of unknown origin?
Oh, yeah,
Something, you know,
absolutely. I mean, I think some of them sustain themselves in our environment for longer periods of times by being able to these covert operations, is to be able to
yeah,
hide themselves. They like the remoteness. They like to be able to hide themselves. If they want to be longevity here, then it seems seems to be the case. But you know what? Then they do transcend into solid matter and into hillsides and volcanoes and stuff. So everything shows that it's here, not
yeah.
out there. It's been the opposite way around, but maybe that was just maybe it's just it's a bit like a sci-fi. It's a bit like a Star Trek episode. They're all
It's,
bipedal. They're all bipedal, by the way, and they all come from all these different.
but they can be all things to all men as well. I mean, you just touched on the fact that you said you see them entering volcanoes or transcending into the sides of mountains, and it's almost as though it's definitely a different science to anything we understand. If we've got at the beginning of our discussion today, I talked about this huge full moon sized sphere that looked like a ball of fire, and it leaves no physical traces on the ground. And you're talking about some UFO that not necessarily looks like fire, might look like some kind of shiny structured craft that enters a volcano or flies so close over it, yet it doesn't bother it. Then we're either seeing some kind of holographic image that they're showing us, or it's something above the timeline.
It is no. There are people. One thing I have learned is by doing this work is that you get asked the most strangest questions from the most odd people, and there are other people out there working not in the public domain that know quite a bit more than we do. But they are interested in the fact that how we gather our information, because they ask us. I've been on calls where, I've been asked by by certain parties who don't reveal their names, the working party and stuff. They're ex-military and whatnot, about how we know certain things. So they do query, have we been in contact with certain people? And Kit Green was one of those people that name came up, and he's associated in a lot of big programs for the government associated with the subject of UFOs and stuff like this. But when I came and become part of the SCU, the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies, when I joined that they asked me to join because they'd looked at Project Doorway and they'd realized that, okay, there's some interesting things, but they knew everything. There's nothing, some of them know. I mean, Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis and the numerous others have been associated with that organization. I was told that they were aware of the stuff. But when posing the questions like, well, how can we ignore? You got this transmedium travel, right? That's in space, that's underwater, and that's in the air. But what about going into mountains? What about going through solid matter, into hill cliffs, into volcanoes? I mean, it demonstrates metaphysicality, not only the phenomena of the ufology, but their craft. They're not just the craft, but the occupants themselves and capabilities like that to go through solid matter and walls. Well, we know about it, but we can't say it because at that point they're trying to get introduced scientists to have a better understanding and start helping with the research. And we can't drop that on them. We can't drop the fourth one on them because it's too much to wrap your head around the understanding of physicality.
So do you think that's because we've obviously, and I'm keen to say that I'm not even scientifically minded enough to maybe say this, but is that because science has got to get to a certain level before it would accept the things that these guys are saying?
I don't think scientists are quite accept the fact that there's a plausibility of being able to transmedium travel in space, underwater, and in air. We've heard about aerofoil vehicles and things like that they might be actually even utilizing and experimenting with themselves in regarding stuff we see. However, to physically go through solid matter, you must be dealing with a phenomena there, not something that we've got, because I don't think that we have got the capabilities or the technology to be able to transcend physical matter, and but I believe that's more the physical. So paranormal does it on an everyday basis.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't put that out. They don't want to share that yet. It's too much, especially the scientists. I mean, the scientists have got to be able to deal with that. Well, we can't deal with a subject matter where it's going through solid material because that means a whole new physics is involved. Let's just stick to something which is more easily manageable and
Yeah.
introduces their interest to the subject without actually scaring them half to death and dropping this on the lap. So I was told, yes, they are aware, but no, they don't want to put that out yet.
Mm.
But like I say, well, what we deliver in the public domain, we're not oversighted by regulators to say we can't put that out. We don't want that out yet. They can't control us that way. So they allow us to do the job for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what we are. We are doing it.
Yeah,
I'm
just
doing it.
by putting this information out, and sometimes not even unknowingly. I can, when you're talking about seemingly solid objects just entering brickwork, or the alien abduction scenario. I've just jumped to that because I was going to go somewhere else with it. But the alien abduction scenario, where these beings seemingly pass through walls and end up in our rooms, and I don't know what your views are when you will get some people saying, oh, that were a MILAB, that's a military type abduction, and you might not agree with me, Steve. I mean, and that really doesn't matter because we can't agree on everything, or you might agree. But the point is, if some of these are military type abductions, then if people have got this kind of technology and this ability, then why aren't they using it to eradicate threats in the world, should we say? We aren't naming anybody or anything.
Exactly. No, I mean, yeah, I know, and I totally agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. Though I do know that there are experiments that have been involved and stuff like that, and there was mind experiments. But there are people that claim that they've had experiences with, these entities, and they've seen humans or soldiers, and they can see anything. See, a purple dinosaur stood next to him. It could be anything. At the end of the day, how do we ever take it exactly as, well, this is what's happened because this is what you've seen? We can't do that. We can never do that. It's crazy. If there's a reason to say, okay, the absurdity again, let's create it. I mean, look, if you look at the Pascagoula case, I mean, it's not often talked about that. They saw human people in there, like doctors, when they were being examined. It's not talked about that area much in the Pascagoula case, but that's what's apparently happened. Well, were they really human doctors there? Or did they perceive that they were human doctors?
Well,
again, so that absurdity again, it goes back.
During childhood, one of the experiences in Night People, I woke up, it must have been summer because it was daylight in the room, daylight pouring through. And I looked forward, not unlike that guy looking forward, but nothing shook me and said, wake up. But when I looked forward, there's a row of these beings at the bottom of the bed. There were two taller ones, and I know there were two smaller ones, but there may have been three. But they looked the same apart from height. Terrifying. I turned away, little boy. I'm not asleep. I don't care what anybody says. I was not asleep. I saw this, but I turned away. Seemed like a long time, but it probably just, I don't know, a minute, 2 minutes. When I turned back, though, I was looking at a row of people from my mum and dad's wedding album.
Oh.
You see, so what I'm meaning is, when you were talking about Pascagoula and they were seeing doctors, are they actually, I'm on the same page as you are, were they actually seeing doctors? Because these, whatever they were, it was almost as though
adults sometimes. Yeah, I mean,
little boy, limited things, limited life experience. But I had seen mum and dad's wedding album, and it's almost like the pick through your mind, and that image will fit.
That's right. I mean, I've got a series of photographs that was taken by a guy called Vanderbroek in Holland, a researcher into he's definitely some type of catalyst, but he has these photographs that appear. I mean, scientists go and take photographs near him, and these images appear on the camera film. And they're just taken. They've not seen anything, but they appear on the film. And there was people appearing, not only the faces of greys and things, but people were appearing on the film, on the camera, and it's people that have passed away. But the image of the person is the image of a photograph of them, not themselves.
Right. I see.
You with me?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what's going on here? It's something really weird. And you know what? That paranormal connection to this, I think, might be that, well, everything is under the heading of power. Maybe ufology has just gone, yep, you're in the wrong area. Let's put you in the paranormal where you belong.
I would agree.
No. And think it is all that because its connections there so much more than anything that I would assume extraterrestrial.
Do you know, not exactly on same lines, but I think you'll remember the case about 20 years ago. Myself and Steve Ashbridge drove to Knaresborough to visit a lady called Muriel Rowbottom and her daughter Sandra Walton, married name. And these were the ladies that claimed that the alien face at the window in Hull, in Sprowtley at the back of the chicken farm, came. They got the pictures of them. And I'd been speaking to Muriel for a few years, and we finally went through to meet them because they weren't living in Sprowtley, which is on the outskirts of Hull then. But where am I going? Oh, thank you. Where am I going with this? They had negatives of the photographs.
Oh, did they? It's on a proper camera film, yeah.
Yeah. So when we arrived, there was a burly type guy stood at the door. It turned out it was her son. Allegedly, somebody had tried to steal the photographs at some time, and he were just there. He weren't threatening. He were a nice guy. Once he realised we were on the level, he were just there to just oversee that his mum and his sister were safe. Yeah. So. But what they said that were interesting is if their story weren't so off the wall, the alien visitation, was that they asked us to look at the negatives with a magnifying glass because they claimed they'd seen a crucifix floating about in the negative. And now I know that's going to be too much for some people and not enough for others, but just a strange one. Yeah. And I don't know if you know the story, do you, Steve?
Only bits and bobs. I didn't know about the crucifix.
The Sprowtley aliens and 1994, like I said, a little village on the outskirts of Hull, and they lived in a bungalow at the back of a chicken farm. And Sandra's at the kitchen sink doing the pots. Mum's in the living room, and she sees lights outside. There's fields, long garden fence, and fields beyond that. And she looks, and she's amber lights. Wonder what they are. Opens the back door, and there's a row of amber lights. Then they form into like a snooker rack shape. Yeah. And she shouts, "Mum!" Mum comes and looks, and they're discussing what they could be. Sandra says, "I'm going upstairs. I'm going to get my camera." So she went running upstairs, and she came back with a camera. But can you remember them with like 4 flashes, and it had turned?
Yeah.
And she stood at the back door and took a picture. She said, and instantly the lights just came straight to the bottom of the garden, and they just hung there. She says, and there's one of them that's white at the right-hand side, and it's got like a shutter. She said, and she thinks something landed. They weren't sure. She said, but they look like eyes. They were red and they were revolving like snooker balls. They became frightened. Shut the door, locked the door. She says, Mum got in one corner at kitchen, I got in other. And this is a first-hand account. I spoke to ladies, and Steve did. And she said, we're in darkness. We turned all lights off. And I don't know whether Mum or Sandra said, I could hear something outside. She says, now I crawled to the sink on my hands and knees. She said, and there's something outside the window. And I just lifted the camera and took a few pictures. And she'd got, it were in Old Daily Mail, and it made national newspapers at the time. And she'd got these pictures of these strange, I don't know what you'd call them, just strange shapes that shouldn't be there. So that were the Sprowtley aliens. And then an interesting one, Steve, and a lot of people will probably go with this. Muriel being probably late 70s then when we spoke to her, so she'd have been, about 72 when this happened, and her daughter being younger. Sandra believed it was aliens. Muriel thought it was biblical. It's just culture and different
exactly
upbringing.
I think we're a big problem.
But the same thing. Yeah. But the same thing.
Same thing, yeah. It's just we're the problem, Paul. Half the time, we want to put them into these boxes and call them different things, and that causes us issues.
Yeah,
because we've done that, and that's why we've got so many people having differences of opinion. What is interesting to do, though, I mean, is utilize it. It's a good piece of equipment. Is a high-speed full spectrums.
Yeah,
high-speed full spectrum cameras. There's been, I mean, I've seen some of the photographs. Barry's got some. It's been caught during experiments as well. I mean, where it's sat between It's been, well, it's actually stood between two people. And I've seen the photographs.
Yeah.
And this thing is big. This thing is, it doesn't, it's big. And it's only there between two people in one frame. That's how
It's
we
so
know.
strange, isn't it?
Well, one frame for them, what is it? Is that one frame for them the same in reality to us, or what time is? Who knows? I don't know. It's
Yeah.
it's really a perception about reality of time, what that one frame represents for them. I mean, is that them standing around and having a good look around at what's going on for a little bit and then disappearing in that one frame? I don't.
Was Barry or whoever took the photograph just lucky and captured it? Do you know, odd times? I mean, I spend a little bit too much on cameras, to be honest with you, but just bog standard digital cameras, say a little Olympus camera or Sony camera, and sometimes I'll charge them up. I've got something in mind when I do it. I'll charge a camera and take it. And it's very rare. I don't know whether you've come across this. I know Brenda Butler's got a lot of these type of photographs because she's shown them me and other people.
Yeah.
Brenda, synonymous with Rendlesham Forest.
Yeah.
I know you know, but
Seen the photographs.
some.
Yeah.
So you say you take 60 photographs
Mm.
with the camera, with the flash in the night, and you'll pick up dust storms. If it's raining, you'll pick up, the specks of rain that illuminate, or even just odd spits, and people try to imagine that they've seen some kind of paranormal, some kind of strange phenomena, and half at time we know it's not. But just occasionally, we've had it in Flixton, and I've had it once in Bempton, up on the cliffs at Bempton, so you can see how rare it is. You'll take a picture, and it's filled with like a purpley blue or gold sparkling
Yes, I've got them.
mist, and it's almost in the shape of people, and you just get 2 or 3 pictures like it in a concentrated area, and then you've lost it. And I've took hundreds and hundreds of pictures and only had this a few times.
I've got them myself. We just refer to them as anomalous. We don't know, because there's no reason for it. And there's sometimes it's in the locations where what is the light source even?
Yeah.
And how's it's getting its variation of color digitally? I think, and we looked into this myself and Barry, and we think it's the adverse effects of phenomena upon the camera as opposed to what it's actually photographing.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Because we know that they can interfere with, there's nothing we can create that they can't interfere with electronically. We've known that they've even managed to do all sorts of things without.
Yeah, you made another great point there, and I know you're on with it. That's probably your next sentence, but the draining of power, the actual full batteries that for some reason appear to deplete.
Yeah,
I don't just mean within seconds, but within minutes. And I brought full Andrew Collins. Andrew. He came up to the cliff tops. He's been about 4 or 5 times now. The first time he came, he brought about 6 or 7 pieces of electrical equipment, mostly voice audio, and they were all charged.
Yeah.
When he left our home, they were charged.
Yeah.
You got nothing out of them.
No, we've done that for many years and realized this. And what we thought was, instead of the super discharge explanation, which is, there's just sudden and super drainage, that the phenomena is utilizing the energy from the batteries. We never confirmed that. We didn't confirm that, there was any extra usage of energy in promotion of the phenomena taking place. Well, the other angle is that to say, okay, well, it doesn't want so much detection, so therefore I'll take away your possibility of being able to do so by diminishing your power source. That's more
plausible to me, to be honest.
Plausible thing, because we're not seeing super production of anything if it's drawing on energy. I mean, if it's drawing on energy and taking it all from batteries, then what's it producing for what it takes? Sometimes. Get that. So I think sometimes they just say, "Oh, you're not filming that. You're not
taking away the ability.
Take away your ability."
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we've been in places where sometimes the phenomena won't even manifest to us until we've decided to put the stuff away. Every time we go out, Paul, we do the 2-test process. Is that to do it with equipment and then get rid of it all and do it again? because sometimes you might get some days where the phenomenon will go, oh, right, okay, now I'll let you experience me because now you've not got a camera on me or whatever.
I would agree.
Sometimes they don't mind at all.
And I think I'm probably the most guilty researcher around because I'm so reluctant not to go with cameras, but I could be depriving myself.
I hope so. I mean, do
yeah.
twice, one with, one out,
Yeah.
Because sometimes there does seem to be variations between the phenomena will allow you to manifest for film or photograph, and sometimes they won't do nothing until you've got even out of sight. And we even try to, there is a way around it because they can obtain the information from us. There's no fooling them regarding camera footage. But myself and Barry have outlined a process of this, of how it can be done without our knowledge, and it's a clever method because they can't obtain the information from us about we're filming them, you see. So sometimes we might be able to get around it, but it's a bit tricky because
I think I know where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Parties. well, yeah, but the subtitle of the second book is Beyond the Thinking Mind, because, and I'm not saying that's exactly where you were going with that, but it strikes me that a lot of the times, because we're never ready for it, we're never ready for when it's going to, but it's almost as though when I don't mean we're in a daydream, but we're never expecting it, when our mind is detached, that this interaction takes place.
Yeah.
And even to the point of our actual contact with the other side of the firewall, it can be achieved by the use of ayahuasca or meditation, or chanting. So it's taking the thinking mind away and exercising that power from beyond the thinking mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about our thinking position at the time of experience. It's really interesting. You want to try and get, we use those flow bands now we put them on the head.
You use what, sorry, Steve?
It's called a flow band.
Okay.
It's a band that goes over the head. It measures brainwave activity to your mobile device. So
right.
You monitor your own brainwave activity during experience, during the sighting of something. And that is when we realize that on some of the occasions, you're not aware of the conscious connection taking place, the initiation process. You're not aware of, you don't even know what's happening. And what happens is that your brain suddenly starts to change brainwave alters to your current waking state to a theta. Now, that theta is like, we have it in light sleep or hypnosis and dream state, and that's theta. And it's like suddenly it takes us from that state to this state, because at this state, theta, we're manipulated. We can manipulate what you see and what you perceive easier. So it's like that conscious connection. It's like Bluetooth pairing.
Yeah.
Are we aware when we Bluetooth pair, when it actually happens?
So here is the sort of advance of science that's giving us a better insight into the phenomena, into the unexplained. Yeah,
fast. It can happen within the fastest we've ever recorded. That alteration when we're experiencing phenomena is 20 seconds. That's it. So the phenomena can grab you in 20 seconds if it wants to. You might be stood there and looking at it and not even realizing, hang on a second, you've already Bluetooth paired with it.
Yeah, the process has already begun.
And the process has already begun. And then it manipulates your process of your brain, so that it puts you into a state where you can start. In other words, it's putting you into a position that if I want to do something or whatever, you're already set for it. Because we put you in that mindset. I mean, and we're not even aware. We didn't even know that was happening. So what's happening during these? We might just go out there and see some lights in the sky and go, "Oh, isn't that really interesting?" And da 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 da. Completely unaware that we've already been captured by it. And if it wanted to proceed, we don't know what's happening to us physically and psychologically. But those flow bands, they do well. And the good thing is we could never measure our brainwave activity. It was a massive big device in hospital on wheels. There was nothing mobile, but now you can do it by your mobile phone and it can monitor your brainwave whilst you're actually out there, And it's interesting because we're not only seeing that when experiencing the UFO phenomena, but we do also experience it in certain ancient sites.
Yeah, that kind of rings true. But why the ancient sites? I think it's more the location, don't you, than the site.
Got to be the location. Yeah.
You know, and therefore the ancient peoples already knew. They might have not, they want to understand the science in the same way that you're talking about it, and I don't understand the science of it, if I'm being
No, I'm
truthful.
still learning, you know.
But the point is that they knew that these areas were special. These areas did produce what they would think of as magical things. And they're the same areas today that are still producing these strange and unusual things.
We call them myself, I call them, refer to them as like thin veils. The thin veils. These are our ancient ancestors recognized thin veiled areas.
Yeah, that's fabulous.
They would reach out to beyond the veil to be able to seek communications with things through the veil on the other side, and they were identified in certain locations. They are still active, many of them.
Yeah.
Some of them are, which were destroyed, some of them by their own ancient side. But some of them, I've been in some of those ones. They're crazy. We've got recordings inside one of these locations during what we refer to as the double knock system. That's during solstice, during the production of and it causes this double knock system. It's like a key, two lock keys together. And what happens is you got these recordings of drum beat and rock movement coming from not our side, it's coming from the other side. You know, and there's been incidents. I mean, Barry's told me about the incidents when, there was a ball of light, it grew in size. He was with people, they were in a forest near to a lake. I've been to that location. And it grew in size, and it became from a ball of light to a ring. And through the ring, you saw a different background.
Right, I see. Like a different scene.
Different scene, different trees. And a woman who was there got up and he shouted, "Don't go near it." And she went near it and she got belted by, it's like it was like an electric shock. It threw her back onto the floor, and it was there for about a good maybe 20, 30 seconds, before it diminished back to a light.
Yeah.
So it seems to have started with a light and then became something and then referred back to a light. So there's lots of things. The problem is that we don't know it's us. We're out there experiencing phenomena, but we're looking at the phenomena but not looking at us. And I think sometimes there's a real good evidence there about, there's some good stuff out now. We can start to look at what's happening to us when we experience this phenomenon.
Yeah. And a lot of the times we could be the instigators of it or evoke it. Well, we do. And you've got some brilliant examples.
You've done like 4 books on truth proofs. Is there a plan for a 5th truth proof book?
Yeah, I'm doing the sub-universe, the submerged universe. I'm working on that at the moment. I'll be... Don't hold your breath. I'll be a long time with it, Steve. But I've really enjoyed speaking with you today, and thank you very much. Feel honoured.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you're in you're actually more or less the same pace as we as well, because our next book is coming out next year, myself and Barry's, and it's staring into darkness, and
right.
I just got a feeling. I know it's going to be a bit similar to what you're going to be touching on. I just have an idea of that because we really are looking at the geological.
I think we don't use exactly the same words, but for the most part, we're on the same page with what we're dealing with or what we think we're dealing with, and that's no bad thing in my eyes.
Where do people get all of your books, Paul? What's the best place? I mean, is it Amazon or is it where?
Anybody who wants the Kindle versions of Truth Proof books and Night People, you can get them on Amazon. You can also get our DVD Wolflands on Amazon.
That's on Amazon, isn't it? Yeah, that's
on Amazon Prime, or you can just contact our website direct, my website, truthproof.uk.
I'll put a link in.
The paperback versions of the books will be sent out from there. Brilliant. And I'm going to put them back on Amazon actually as well, the actual paperbacks shortly. I just had to take them off if I'm being truthful.
To be honest with you, buddy, it's not so much for the UK. It's for the non-UK. That's where Amazon really helps.
Yeah.
And Japanese publication. Tell you you do rocket Japan. It's the same for Barry, same for me.
Really?
That'd be an idea for the Japanese market.
Yeah, I'm not really tech savvy, and everything I do when it comes to writing.
AI does it all now. You just pop it in a computer. It does it for free online. You just put your document in, and it changes it into Japanese or whatever.
Really?
Oh my God, yeah. The world of
Right,
AI
I didn't know that.
it does have some good points, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Not so bad, but some good ones.
I wonder. Well, yeah, see, everything's worth considering, just like the subject we're invested in, Steve.
Exactly, mate. So big thank you for coming on the show, Paul. I will be putting links into your YouTube channel, where to get your website, where to get the books from. Also the Truth Proof podcast show, which it's a live one, isn't it? So
Live every Thursdays.
everybody's got a chance to be able to ask a question and stuff and interact, which is good, because that doesn't happen very often. I'll put all those links in the description. Big thank you for coming on the show and sharing the information. If you want to find out, guys, any more about Paul's work, you'll be there forever, because he's been at this for a long time, and it's the meat on the bone, I say. It's getting out there and feet on the ground. There was active investigators, which unfortunately are a bit of a dying breed.
Yeah, well,
do it from the computer now, and it can't
I'll be there tonight. I'll be out tonight.
there again tonight, Paul.
Yeah.
So big thank you for Paul for coming on. In the meantime, if anybody needs to get hold of Paul, I'll be putting links in there how to get a hold of him. And don't forget to check out his podcast. I'm sure you'll find it very interesting. And again, the live stream versions, you can ask questions and interact with the guests and Paul as well. So thank you again, Paul, for coming on the show.
Steve, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
I'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.